Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm Brian. Sitting next to me is Pastor Chad, and this is Beyond the Sermon.
Yes, it is. Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing well today. We're going to have a good conversation, I do believe.
Yeah, I got notes. I printed stuff off this time.
That's empty. There's nothing on there. That's just blank pieces of paper.
I mean, it's not like your scribbles, but I mean...
That's true. What do you mean?
I have things written down.
What? What do you mean, my scribbles?
I mean,
I can understand that.
You need a bigger bulletin.
I do. You ought to see what I see right here. It's a mess.
Wow, that'd be funny if it was almost like a little book, and you had things like attached to it, and post-it pads, and your little arrow stickers that you put in books.
Yeah. Don't give me any ideas.
That's a whole new line of special that you have those little arrows. I'm kind of jealous that I've never saw them before.
Yep.
Or decided to do that because I would just like kind of mark things down. But you have these little.
Okay. So what he's talking about is I have. You just kind of spill the beans, man.
I know, without providing context.
So I basically do not read a book. I do not read a book unless I have like little pointer tabs with it. I don't care what the book is.
Yeah.
Like I just don't. And so if I'm reading a biography, it's been a while since I've read one, I've got these little pointer tabs just because there may be something in there that inspires me or I think about, or maybe used for a sermon or used for a podcast or used for this or used for counseling or just use, for our men's life group or just an interesting idea that we could talk about, like, sit around the campfire like we did last night. So anything like that. So I will not read a book unless I have those little pointers. And I think I've kept 3M in business by purchasing those. So I've done that for years.
What I like how you read a book, you don't just read it, you almost study it.
I do.
It becomes like a form of you just like really diving deep in that, or at least that's the way it looks through the stickers and the writing and the circles and all that. So
I used to, and I still do this some, but I used to have. I would put the little Post-it tabs on there again because I want to. If I read a book, I want to be able to go back to it.
Yeah.
And if there's something there that sparks something, no better way to do it than these little tabs. But I would also put like a little star and then put like little abbreviations for what I thought maybe it would be helpful for. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Do you ever dog ear stuff?
No. Good grief, no.
No, you don't bend the page.
What is the matter with you?
So you got to keep them nice and crisp.
Yeah,
like a baseball card.
Yeah, exactly. Brrr, put it in your spokes of your bike. You were probably that kid, weren't you? Be like, oh, that's a Mickey Mantle. Brrr, sounds good. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I don't think I've ever done that. No,
I didn't either. It was really before my time. But
what did I use? Oh, I couldn't even tell you now.
Yeah.
I used something, but I don't remember what it was. No, it was a one of those zip ties.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can just like zip it right on there and then just allow the excess to kind of go through.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart. Yeah. No, I don't do that though. I just tab them up.
Just tab them up.
Yeah, that's what I do.
There you go.
Yeah.
I loved your sermon. That's why I printed it off, because there was a lot of things. Usually I'm like, okay, I got to find something, but
this is the first, by the way. I don't think Brian's ever printed off. So you actually, it's a masterpiece.
It is a masterpiece. Like I got all kinds of stuff.
It's not. It could be better. Everything could be better.
What I love at the very beginning was don't let your hustle hinder your worship.
Yeah.
And I feel like hustle culture.
Yeah.
That's a hard word to kind of say together.
Yeah.
But, just the idea of like, always having something to do, or having, 2 or 3 things, and you're just hustling, you're just always moving. And I feel like when you hear the word hustle, it's like a rush.
Yeah.
Not like a rush of like adrenaline, but you're in a rush.
Right.
And oftentimes, if you're in a rush and you're busy, you're not thinking about God.
Right. Yeah.
If I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Like, I got things to do. I don't have time to read my Bible. I got things to do. I don't have time to worship. I got things to do. I don't have time to sit down and reflect.
Yeah.
Or see what God's doing. I got to get all these things done.
A mental image just came up. I just thought about this. You're going to love it because you love sci-fi. I don't. So this reference is really kind of probably odd for you. But I'm thinking of like Star Trek.
Oh, here we go.
Right?
All right.
When they go warp speed.
Yeah.
That's what it's like when, for me, the mental image I just had was like in the hustle, it's like warp speed. And the thing is, what happens in the TV show, right? They go, warp speed, Mr. Sulu. And it just, all you see is a streak of light. You don't see the stars.
Yeah.
You don't see any of it.
Right.
And that really becomes what it is for me. It's like if I'm operating at a pace that's frantic or too hectic or just busy or I'm just in a rut.
Yeah.
It for me is like warp speed where you don't actually get to enjoy much of anything.
Right.
You're just kind of doing the next thing.
Right. And I want people to know this too, like you and I, we're not immune.
Right.
Even being, here at the church,
Right.
like we can get in a hustle and get really busy
Right.
and lose sight of it, and we're in the church. We're in the place where people worship, and go to the altar. And sometimes even I can still miss the mark and be like, okay, I need to stop. I need to, kind of pump the brakes a little bit.
So that phrase had two meanings, and I didn't really talk about it in either one of the sermons, but the phrase had two. That wording was important. It had two meanings of hustle, meaning busyness, and also the hustle of like if somebody's hustling, right?
Oh, okay.
So they're hustling somebody else. They're like kind of like hucksters.
Yeah.
Like kind of playing a game because it was letting their busyness, right, of like, hey, you got all these people coming in and being at temple courts and you got all the animals and all this, so, right? It's kind of business as usual, but also busyness of the season. So literally that phrase had two different meanings.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about the other hustle,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, you're totally right. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're good with that one. See,
That was it. Man, there's like 1,000 words on that page.
yeah, but I only circled that one little part.
That's it. I thought you said it was a masterpiece.
Well, look at you. So you start razzing me, and
I
that makes
know.
me lose my train of thought. And
Perfect.
you know that too. You do it on purpose.
I do.
I liked how you said we shouldn't make it difficult for other people
Yeah.
to worship. And you gave the example of like, you're sitting in my seat,
Yeah.
which is so true because we all do that. We all have a seat. And I'm glad you mentioned it, and I hope people can pick up on this. And if they didn't, I want to spell it out for them, that be aware of your actions
Yeah.
and how people respond to those actions. And you may have the best of intentions, because if you were to walk up and say, excuse me, I'm going to disrupt someone's worship, no one would want to willingly do that.
Mm-hmm.
So just being aware of your actions. And I'm glad, you said that. But what inspired you to come up with that phrase? Because it's a really good one.
Well, I'll say this, that is actually a very common thing that happens of people get in a rut, they sit in their seat, and unfortunately, I think every church I've attended, I've probably heard that happening of like having somebody move because they're in your seat, that kind of thing. And that bothers me because it's a total unawareness to the new person.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're to be the type of people who are inviting other people to come to know Jesus, that's just a common everyday way of doing what they were doing in the temple courts.
Yeah.
Because the Gentiles, it was making them difficult to come and worship God.
Yeah.
And we do that when we get territorial about our seats, or we get territorial about our church, or we get territorial about certain things. I'll share two stories based upon that. So after that sermon, a brother came up to me on yesterday. He came up to me and he said, it's like the blood just fell from his face. And he said he was here, but he doesn't attend Calvary regularly. He's not a member. And so his blood rushed from his face, and he came up to me. He's like, I did that 2 weeks ago.
Oh no.
He's like, there was a new person, and they had their seat, and he'd been totally unaware. And he's like, and I'm convicted about that. And I said, good.
Really?
I did.
You just said good?
I said, well, that's good. I said, well, and I didn't mean that, and that wasn't me trying to be a smart aleck. It's like, good, you listen to God. Hey, God's speaking to you, and you heard him.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Right? It's the only way we can truly change.
Right.
And he said, I really think that I need to go and I need to apologize. I said, I think you do too.
Wow. Well, good for him. Good for.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, that phrase in that time, and God used it, which is great for this. I'm bragging on God in this individual because hearing God and then acting upon what it is God is saying. The other story is this: when we lived in Georgia, my insurance agent, super nice guy, super easy to talk to. I mean, he was an Air Force guy, and if I went in there, I literally had to block out an hour because he's like holding calls while I go in there so we can tell aviation stories and
Oh, boy.
Aeronautics and all the things that he was into. Have you heard about this? And I was like, no, tell me about it. So we've had a lot of conversations. Great guy. Did not attend church regularly. This is key.
Okay.
They tried to attend a church, he with his mom, and his mom was ill years ago. Not the church that I was pastoring, a different church. Went into the church, and as he went into the church with his mom, and again, if memory serves me correct, his mom was actually in failing health.
Okay.
They go into the church. He's bringing his mom to church. Somebody comes up and says, "Excuse me, you're in my seat."
No.
They were just. He didn't attend church.
Yeah.
He was there because of his mom, and
Right.
again, mom, ill health, older.
Yeah.
He was there because of her, and all of that. So, I don't think we always realize how hard it is, and all the things that have had to gone right for somebody to be at church, because not everybody just goes on a regular basis.
It's a miracle for some people to get there.
Right. And it's like, and as soon as he came in and that happened, they bolted.
I bet.
They're done.
And rightfully so.
Right. At least from that place.
Yeah.
I would say if that has happened, you'd go to a different church. Right.
Yeah.
Or if you can go to somebody in authority and say, hey, this happened and it hurt my feelings, and just be honest. Yeah. And even if you leave, at least that church could be better because the leadership would know, hey, this happened, and I think you should know.
Right. And if it's led correctly, that leadership would then either craft a message
Yep.
or just bluntly just tell everyone, like, hey, we are a church. Like,
Yeah.
these aren't labeled.
Right.
Like you said, there's no name tags on
Yep.
these. And talk to that individual privately, but then talk to the congregation, because if there's one, chances are there's going to be, another. Like, we are not this kind of church.
Right.
So that's,
and we,
wow.
To my knowledge, we don't have necessarily a problem of that.
I don't think so.
But
No.
but by saying that prescriptively, it's a lot easier than than having something have happened. People get their feelings hurt. Saying it up front to just put that in the forefront of people's minds is important.
People should look at this as an opportunity to connect.
Right.
Because sometimes it's hard for people to, connect with someone new
Yep.
or just connect in general. Maybe they're just a little more private. So if you see someone sitting in your seat, just sit next to them.
Right.
And you may be able to strike up a conversation with them and really create a connection and a relationship, or,
Right.
Or maybe you're in a life group and you're like, hey, why don't you try our life group or something like
Yeah.
so many, good opportunities can come from someone sitting in your seat.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I would look at
Yeah.
it, and kind of taking it from your message.
And it's just loving your neighbor as yourself, right? If you were in that situation, how would you want people to respond to you?
Yeah.
Would you want to like, hey, I'm barely at church today. I'm not even necessarily a church going person, not a Christian, but I'm curious about Jesus and faith and just know that, hey, people are going to go to church to find out things about Jesus. At least that's kind of the common thing, right, on Sunday morning.
Yep.
And then to go in there, if the roles were reversed, what would you want?
Yeah.
You would want somebody to make you feel welcome and loved, and also so that you would never know that you're sitting in quote unquote somebody else's seat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then it looks like that you're a problem.
Yeah, like I've done something wrong.
And it's like, no, there's no problem. No. I'll stand in the back if that means you get to sit. That should be our mentality. Not I'll go sit somewhere else. If it requires of me to stand in the back so somebody else can sit, we should be willing to do that.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, there's plenty of room in the front row.
There's that.
So if somebody wants to sit next
There's
to
that.
me,
Yeah.
go right ahead.
Actually, there's not plenty of room in the front row during the second service. They're pretty full, but
It is pretty full.
For the first service there is, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a real thing. I'm going to kind of jump here.
Okay.
You were talking about worship, and you were how can I phrase this? You were talking about worship and people coming in and worshiping God during a service,
Yeah.
and how other things sometimes can keep us from worshiping God.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to present the question to you and to you, and then, kind of challenge our mindset. All things that we should do, or do you think all things that we should do can be considered worship?
All things?
Well, okay. I know you don't like broad things, so let me say this.
No, I mean, I like percent. So if you could say if 70%,
Percent.
if you listen to the show, you know that's an inside joke.
It is
he
an
loves
inside joke.
percents. It's like, yeah.
And it's not like an 80-20. It's like 64%,
Exactly.
63%.
About 64% of me says this, and then but 36% says the other.
And the thing is, I'm being for real. Like,
That's true.
I'm not like joking about
That's
that.
true. That's true. All right, rephrase your question. Don't say all, because you
So
know what I'm going to say.
I'm just going to make the statement.
Okay.
Going to work
Yeah.
can be a form of worship. Your hobby can be a form of worship.
Right.
Going for a walk can be a form of worship. Loving your wife
Right.
can be a form of worship. Being a father to your kids can be a form of worship. Doing the dishes can be a form of worship.
Right.
Helping your wife with supper can be a form of worship. People often think that going to church and singing a few songs is worship. And it is,
Yeah.
but it's not the only type of worship. And I feel like people, I'm starting to get goosebumps, often think through stories that they read in scripture, how you had like, Jesus' disciples and stuff, how they were worshiping God all day long. And then it makes them feel guilty, like they're not doing enough. So what I just said, you need to change your mindset and say, okay, everything, what the things that I mentioned can be a form of worship.
Yeah.
And then you can confidently say at the end of the day, I've been worshiping God all day long. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think of an example I've actually referenced on the show a long time ago, a book by Brother Lawrence called Practice in the Presence of God. He was actually in a monastery, and one of the things that he details in this really thin book, and he just kind of writes down key moments in it, was just time of worship, practicing the presence of God in the kitchen washing dishes.
Yes.
So it's just that. It's just like, and sometimes I think that's just how we need to position our mind and heart when we do even other things. It's like, no, like this contributes to something that is beautiful. It contributes to health, because you're going to get disease. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get bacteria. You're going to get whatever by having dirty dishes. So what am I doing? I'm helping somebody else by doing this. Well, I'm loving my neighbor.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I realize that you could make, you could really twist this around and make everything spiritual, and I don't want to do that.
No, and that's not my intent.
Yeah.
With what I'm saying, but it's a slippery slope.
It is.
It can go that way.
Yeah, right. And so the thing I think about in response to that is, and we had this conversation literally around the campfire at my house yesterday during our life group. It's like that John Calvin quote that the human heart is a factory of idols.
Yes.
So with that awareness.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, anything that you mentioned could be an idol.
Absolutely.
Anything.
Yeah.
And anything that becomes an idol is something that we are worshiping.
Right.
You cannot worship two masters.
Right.
So you're either going to worship that thing or you're going to worship God.
Right.
So none of those things inherently are bad or wrong as long as they don't become idols.
Right.
If all you do is you fantasize about your hobby, and everything you do revolves around your hobby,
right?
And you're and now it just everything about your life devolves into that. Mm-hmm. It's like then you think about it, you dream about it, you're buying things for it, you're spending time on it, you're making excuses for it, you're taking time off of other more valuable things.
Absolutely.
And now you're doing that instead. Well, then it starts to look like now it's becoming an idol.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that kind of leans into the hustle part.
Yes.
And because you're going so fast, now, lies and deception can kind of enter in because you can't stop and kind of see the truth and see, what it truly means. I think kids can be another form of idol worship.
Yeah.
With parents just, being super involved with their kids.
Right.
Not saying that's a bad thing, but when it becomes obsessive or very busy in the hustle of
Right.
your children's life is kind of consumed everything.
Right. Because
Yeah.
and if you go too far, you'll know when something becomes an idol when that where you fixate on that one thing and that everything revolves around that. And if your kids are becoming an idol, then all of a sudden their sports or their hobbies become the most important thing to you. Then you're not doing family worship at home, and then you don't have time for your own friends.
Right. Yeah.
And you spend every waking moment, every weekend or every waking moment driving here to there to go do all these things, when the best and most loving thing sometimes we can tell our kids is no.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if our child is our idol, they're just going to get green lights, yes. And it's like, well, my job for 18 years is to be miserable, to make sure that you have everything you need and everything you want, and then that way you're going to turn out the best. No, actually, one of the best things we can do is give them limits. And
100%.
if our kids are becoming idols, then, we as we abide in Jesus, we should be able to pinpoint that, like, things are a little lopsided.
They are. Yep.
I'm more concerned about how they feel or what's going on with them than actually what God would say about what I'm doing with them.
Right.
And there's so many examples and kind of nuance with this.
Oh yeah, there is. And I can feel like I can almost feel the arguments kind of brewing with some people. Oh, I don't do that.
Right.
I'm this, I'm that with my kids. But it's
right.
If you're getting defensive, there's a sign right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might be right, but chances are. Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the young parents with a child who's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months old, and they're just they're just exhausted all the time, and they're the child needs you. Like, I'm not talking about
of the
that.
Time. Yeah.
I'm talking about not just those early nurturing years, infant years, where it is very demanding. Now, can you still go to church and have an infant? Yes. Should you? Yes.
Yeah. It's hard.
But you should do it, because
100%.
millions of people all around the world through thousands of years have done the same thing.
Absolutely.
I think we can too.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So I'm not, and sometimes that is what happens. It's like they almost idolize. Now we have a child and their life stops, and say, well, when they mature, we'll come back to church. I've actually heard that. And I'm like,
really?
So I'm like, wow, what? Well, when they get into a better sleep pattern, we'll come back to church. I'm like, you're putting your spiritual life based upon their sleep pattern, and you're going to get used to not being around God's people, and you're going to fill that with something else. It's just so many points of danger.
It is.
So I'm not necessarily talking about early years, although they should be at church too. They can abide, and we talked about this recently. They got to be,
Oh yeah.
They got to be kind of crafty and like, okay, I'm going to do this. They're sleeping. I need to take a breath, Yeah. But I'm really talking about when the kids get a little older,
Right.
and the opportunity for extracurriculars kicks in.
Yep.
And oftentimes what's neglected is actually time in the Word, and there's more time at a ball field, or there's more time at a court, or there's more time at some fairground somewhere, rather than teaching your kids Jesus. We're teaching them how to throw a curve.
Right. Yeah. Because I think the longevity of having the Word of God in you is going to outlast
Amen.
Your ability to throw a curveball,
Right.
or buckets, making
Right.
buckets, as
Sure.
they say,
And I'm a sports guy. So
And-
this
and I'm
isn't
not.
right. So I'm a sports guy. So I'm not like, well, he's just out of time. No, I love sports.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a sports guy, but I also realize that, kids need healthy boundaries,
They do. They really do.
and they can be idols if we let them.
And my encouragement, you were talking about like the sleep pattern.
Yeah.
When they get in a better sleep pattern, sometimes that sleep pattern never happens.
Right.
Because was it really the sleep pattern, or are you just coming up with an excuse and then labeling it as a sleep pattern?
Yeah.
Because then they're going to get older, and then you're going to come up with another excuse and another and another, and before you know it, they're teenagers, or they're they're this and they're that. So
Some of the sweetest things that I see is young couples or couples, they bring in their baby, and you know they're in the throes of it.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you know that it's. I've been there. We have 2 kids, or adult kids, but I remember vividly. It's difficult, and to see them come in and see the church family hold the baby, right, so they can sit in service, just take a deep breath, you know, sleep, whatever they need to do, right, just like recover. I mean, I'm just being honest. You know, I don't want them to sleep, but hey, that may be the only sleep they get today. It's like whatever, sleeping to the glory of God. I don't know, but I just love when seeing church folk then grab that little baby and say, "You guys are fine," and they'll serve in that capacity. That's so special to me. And when I see it, I'm just like, that is the church being the church.
It is, yeah. And I hope other people see that and appreciate that too.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. I threw all my papers down, and
Sure
I know
you
there's
did.
one more.
You show off?
I want to do one more before we kind of wrap things up here. And let's see, where is it at? Here it is. It's right here. People who want his works, but not his word, can never share his life.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why people don't want his word is because his word reveals.
Right.
And,
I agree.
And that shows pain. But then I started thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, why is it painful? Is it painful because they're a Christian and they're not hitting all the marks? Or maybe because of their life before Christ, their life was painful, right? And they see the works of God and they see that comfort and they're like, oh, and you need that, right? It's not the only thing you need, but you need that at first. You need to feel comfortable because you were uncomfortable. You're tired of being tired. You're hurting, and you just need comfort. You need to be healed. You get that, but then you start reading more about his word, and then there's a revelation that happens. I think sometimes people don't want his words because when they feel pain, they're associating that pain with their life before they were saved.
Wow. Yeah.
I was kind of stewing about this. I'm like, could that be it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely a side of it, and of which they need to go back to the gospel.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't their performance or lack of performance that secured their salvation. It was Jesus' sacrifice on the cross and their repentance.
Yeah.
Right? That secured their salvation. So it was never based upon their performance.
Right.
And I think it can be really tricky in that. And I think that there's a pride trap and there's a shame trap, and both of those are actually connected to pride and hubris. But it's like there's a pride trap of like, no, I'm fine on my own. And not to be fully committed.
Right.
And you'll never really have his life.
Right.
And yet there's the shame side of it that you're pointing to. It's like they're recalling everything that they did before salvation, or everything they did yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, if you're being honest,
mulling it over,
right,
and then also missing the mark and then fall into the shame trap that it's like, well, now it's almost easier if I just ignore it. It's easier because it's too painful dealing with the reality of what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or yesterday.
Right.
But I believe that every time that the Spirit of God reveals one of those things to us, whether it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or yesterday, it's an opportunity for us to change and grow.
100%.
It's an opportunity. I think it's John 17:17. I think it's John 17:17. I'm just trying to recall this from my own studies at home, and the word says, "Sanctify them with your truth. Your word is truth."
Yeah. That's a good word.
Sanctify them with your truth. Well, what's the truth? The truth is God revealed something that was not right.
Right.
Whether it was 10 years ago and it was just brought to your attention, 5 years ago, just brought to your attention, or yesterday that you neglected that God's bringing to your attention. That's the work of sanctification, the setting apart, the Spirit's work to make you holy and to make you more like Jesus.
Yes.
And that is what gives you life.
Yes, that's right. That's a good word. So you're starting to get all wound up a little bit
I know.
here. I like it. And thinking about that and just what you said, and then referencing your message too, I'd rather be in pain with Jesus than to be in pain without him.
Right.
And it's a different type of pain. And people are like, well, what does that mean? Being alone, like by alone, I'm talking about not being saved.
Yeah.
Okay, not having Jesus with you, right? And having that pain, it hurts. It's a different type of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a pain with Jesus, it's a pain with purpose.
Right.
And you understand why you're in pain, and you find the wisdom about it, versus why is all this happening to me? Why am I doing? There's too many whys before Jesus, and then you have those whys answered with Jesus. So there's a pain with purpose.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of a book I have not read, but I'm reminded of just a very drastic example, but I think a drastic example is helpful. Kind of honestly connecting much of what we talked about in worship and how do you worship in those times where there's pain with the presence of God, and how can you worship through that? And I think the book is called In the Secret Place, In the Hiding Place, In the Secret Place by Corrie ten Boom.
Okay.
So Holocaust survivor.
Oh, wow.
Details events in concentration camps, her and her sister, and like very vivid in that, and talking about spiritual decisions they're making while there, just to follow and worship God while they're in the middle of that hell on earth.
Can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah,
that is wild.
But I think we have to. Maybe it's just me, but I think that there's perhaps more. There's more than just me who needs this. Sometimes I need to be shaken up with the drastic example to say, well, how can they do that? And I,
and we struggle with this.
Like I lose my faith in traffic. You know what I mean? I don't, but you know what I mean? It's like, how can that be? And yet somebody can go through something so drastic and so painful, but they do it with God in such a worshipful way.
Oh, praise God.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I think I know I need those drastic examples to say, okay, I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Because if that's available, there's a life that Jesus is promising that I'm apparently not tapping into like I could.
Right.
Like he's offering.
Yeah.
And the answer could be that very thing that you said that God revealed, whether it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or yesterday.
Yeah.
It could be that thing that God's just like, here's an open door to you.
Right.
And on the other side is wholeness and health and more pure worship and,
Amen.
Power and presence of God.
Yeah, that's right. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. You just kind of shake me up a little bit with that whole Holocaust thing. That's real stuff.
Corrie ten Boom. Yeah. Marla actually read that on like audiobook, listened to an audiobook and shared some of the stuff with me. And I've known a little bit of the story, but then actually when she would go through and we'd listen to it in the house, or she would share some things with me, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, hey, everybody. I know that's a hard transition from being like that and then back to this, but hopefully you got something good out of this. I just slid my paper off, so
he's done now.
There's a good sign. Yeah, that's right.
He's done now.
But hopefully you got some good laughs out of this. But then also, it's our sincere hope that you were challenged by this.
Yeah.
If you disagreed with us, good.
Yeah.
We want you to disagree, so that you can challenge our words and see that we love you. We have, best intentions. We want to help you and encourage you and help you grow towards Christ. So take what we say, challenge it, look it up, and apply it to your life and see if it works for you.
Yeah.
But we love you, and we hope you got something good out of this, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
See you, everybody.